Senator Scott Newman is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, and I spoke with him this week. What did you take away from this hearing?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you again. I'm going to do my very best to answer all of your questions, as thoroughly as I can in the time that we have available. What did I take away from the hearings? Number one, confirmation from law enforcement that crime is in fact escalating, and it has become more and more dangerous for the police that are out on the street. It is more and more dangerous for our public to be out on the street. And for my constituents out in what I affectionately call cornfield country, I want them to know that the crime and the increased crime that they see in the urban areas will, and I believe is going to affect their public safety. You can't have a dramatic increase in crime like we have in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the two biggest cities in the state, without it also affecting the ring suburbs and ultimately out into rural Minnesota. So this unfortunate increase in crime is going to affect all of us statewide, and we simply have to get a better handle on it. That was my confirmation, my takeaway from what law enforcement told us.
Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher told the committee that the trend of increased criminal activity began before the COVID-19 pandemic and before the murder of George Floyd. So back in 2019, this trajectory began. And if that is the case, then what can be done to reverse the trend, thereby allowing these communities to regain a sense of safety?
For years now, we have been more and more lenient with folks who commit crimes. There's a small percentage, in my opinion, a small percentage of people who commit crimes. And we have been increasingly lenient with them when it comes to bail. It's just a revolving door. The cops arrest them, they put up bail, and they're back on the street. Folks increasingly are being given probation with no jail time. We are seeing youngsters, 13, 14 years old, that begin committing crimes by first they're stealing cars, then they're doing carjackings, and then that leads to the more violent crime. In my world, Shannon, illegal actions, bad conduct has consequences. It has consequences. And if you are going to be someone who wants to commit a crime in Minnesota, there has to be consequences for that. And we have to stop being so lenient on what has occurred within our criminal justice system. And we have to stop blaming the cops for all of the wrongful conduct. The cops aren't initiating this wrongful conduct. They get a role to play, and they certainly have to do a better job in community relations. That's not what I'm talking about. If you commit a crime in Minnesota, I think you should go to jail. And there are many, many crimes, particularly property damage crimes. There's no consequences.
Well, this brings up the issue of prosecutorial and judicial discretion. You have been critical of Ramsey County Attorney John Choi's decision not to prosecute felony charges that stem from what are often referred to as pretextual stops, or traffic stops that don't involve public safety, like for a broken taillight or expired tabs. According to my research, both Minneapolis and St. Paul are in favor of this decision. Other communities are considering adopting policies like this. But what is the legislature's role then in helping to determine the bail and whether charges are brought and all of that? Is there a role for the legislature?
There absolutely is a role for the legislature. But to begin to answer your question, cast it in the light of the immediate past question that you just answered me. The increasing crime in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And in Minneapolis and St. Paul, yes, the county attorney in Hennepin County, the county attorney in Ramsey County are in favor of not prosecuting folks who have committed an illegal act while driving. Look at the word pretext. Pretext means a ruse. It means a pretense. Police officers should be justifiably upset with County Attorney Freeman and County Attorney Choi for using that kind of terminology, because it puts the cops in a position where apparently they believe they are stopping people on a ruse or on a pretense just to stop them. Sheriff Fletcher specifically denied that these legal stops for a traffic violation were being done by targeting blacks. He said that's not true. I believe him. I think that police officers have an obligation to enforce the laws that the legislature passes. That's the legislator's role. We have passed certain laws that says, if you drive under these circumstances, this conduct is illegal. Law enforcement has to do something about it because we passed that law. County attorneys have jurisdiction to prosecute claims because the legislature created the county attorney position. And in that creation of the law, that body of law, it says that county attorneys have a duty, this is a legal duty, to prosecute claims. John Choi is not fulfilling his legal duty. He has taken the step to refuse to enforce an entire body of law, i.e. these traffic violations, which if you talk to law enforcement, these traffic violation stops often lead to much more serious crimes that they are able to solve. And just talk to some of the sheriffs and chiefs of police in surrounding the metropolitan area. John Choi does not have uniform support of his policy. And in my view, if John Choi is not going to perform his legal duty, if he's not going to do his job, then I think he should resign.
Let's talk about law enforcement for a moment, because several of the officials before the committee spoke of declining officer morale and fear among officers of making mistakes. It was also mentioned that recruiting new officers has become more difficult. We know that for a variety of reasons, there are not enough officers in St. Paul and Minneapolis. Is the funding adequate, and how can the morale problem be solved?
The only funding jurisdiction that the Transportation Committee has is with the Highway Patrol. And the Transportation Committee fully funded the Minnesota State Highway Patrol. We gave them absolutely everything they asked for. They wanted money for their trooper academy. They wanted salary increases. They had a laundry list of requests. And you talk to Colonel Langer, and he will absolutely agree with me that the legislature gave him everything that he asked for. That is not true in Minneapolis, and it's not true in St. Paul. They're starving the police departments for money. Consequently, my figures are going to be close, but I think that Minneapolis is supposed to have about 800 cops. As of a year ago, they were down to 200. So they're down to about 600. As of a few weeks ago, they were down another 100 or so. So you don't have enough police on the street in Minneapolis to do the job. The same thing is going on in the city of St. Paul. There's not enough cops on the street to do the job because the city councils in both of those two cities are squeezing the funding. They're stopping the funding. So they're not adequately funded. The state patrol is adequately funded. And I invite you to talk to Colonel Langer about that. Are the police afraid? Absolutely, they're afraid. They're afraid because the consequence of the city councils in Minneapolis and St. Paul and the county boards in Ramsey County and Hennepin County, they're not supporting the police. They are emboldening the criminals. It is becoming more and more dangerous for the cops out on the street. And they are gradually coming to the realization, the decision, why should I put myself and my family in jeopardy if the people we are protecting don't have our back?
Senator
you
Newman.
indeed are seeing moral, the decline in their morale, because it's real and it's there.
Senator Newman, we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome.